The gunshot that split the afternoon air wasn't meant for Delilah Bennett, but the rattlesnake coiled 6 feet from where she knelt gathering wild sage certainly heard it, and in one fluid strike of pure instinct, sank its fangs deep into her calf before she even registered the danger. Empire City, Nevada sat like a forgotten promise in the harsh desert landscape of 1882, a collection of weathered buildings that clung to existence through sheer stubbornness, and the silver mines that honeycombed the mountains nearby. Delilah had come west 3 months prior with her Aunt Martha, seeking a fresh start after her parents succumbed to fever back in Missouri. At 22 years old, she possessed a practical nature that served her well in this unforgiving territory, but no amount of common sense could have prepared her for the searing pain that shot through her leg as the snake's venom entered her bloodstream. She fell backward, her basket of herbs scattering across the sandy ground, and watched in horror as the diamondback slithered away into the rocks. The pain was immediate and excruciating, like someone had driven a burning spike through her flesh. Her hands shook as she pressed them against the twin puncture wounds, blood seeping between her fingers, and for the first time since arriving in Nevada, Delilah felt genuine terror grip her heart. Lucas Shepard had been tracking a cougar that had killed 2 calves from the Henderson Ranch when his rifle accidentally discharged, the bullet striking a boulder and ricocheting harmlessly into the sky. He cursed his own carelessness, knowing the sound had likely scared off any game within a mile radius, but then he heard something that made his blood run cold. A woman's scream, cut short and strangled, coming from somewhere beyond the ridge. He spurred his horse Thunder forward, the big bay gelding responding instantly to his urgency. Lucas had worked as a ranch hand and occasional guide for the better part of 5 years since arriving in Empire City at 18. His reputation built on reliability and an uncanny ability to navigate the treacherous terrain surrounding the town. He was 27 now, his face weathered by sun and wind, his hands calloused from hard work, but his eyes remained sharp and observant, constantly scanning the landscape for danger. When he crested the ridge and saw the woman crumpled on the ground, his heart seized in his chest. He recognized her immediately, Delilah Bennett, the new arrival who worked at the general store with her aunt. He had seen her countless times, admired from a distance the way she carried herself with quiet dignity, the way her dark hair caught the sunlight, the gentle kindness in her voice when she spoke to customers. He had never worked up the courage to do more than tip his hat and mumble a greeting, but now none of that mattered because she was lying on the desert floor, her face already pale, her breathing rapid and shallow. Lucas dismounted before Thunder had fully stopped, hitting the ground at a run. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands hovering uncertainly before settling on her shoulders. "Miss Bennett, what happened?" Her eyes, wide with fear and pain, locked onto his. "Snake," she gasped, gesturing weakly toward her leg. "Rattler got me." Lucas felt his stomach drop. He had seen men die from rattlesnake bites, watched them suffer through fever and delirium, their limbs swelling to grotesque proportions. Out here, miles from town with no doctor readily available, the venom could kill her within hours. He glanced at the wound, already beginning to swell, dark bruising spreading from the bite marks. "I need to get the venom out," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "This is going to hurt, but I have to do it fast." Delilah nodded, biting down on her lower lip so hard he worried she would draw blood. Lucas pulled his knife from his belt, the blade catching the sunlight, and made 2 small incisions over the fang marks. Blood welled immediately, darker than it should be, and he knew the venom was already spreading. Without hesitation, Without thinking about propriety or what people might say, he bent his head to her leg and began to suck at the wound, drawing the poisoned blood into his mouth and spitting it onto the sand. The taste was bitter and metallic, making his stomach turn, but he forced himself to continue, working methodically, knowing that every second counted. Delilah's hand found his shoulder, gripping it tightly, her fingers digging into his shirt as she fought against the pain. He could feel her trembling, hear her rapid breathing, and something fierce and protective surged through him. After what felt like an eternity but was likely only a few minutes, Lucas sat back, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "I got as much as I could, but we need to get you to Doc Harrison. Can you ride?" Delilah tried to stand, but her leg buckled immediately. The venom was spreading fast, her calf swollen tight against her boot, the skin hot and discolored. "I do not think so," she whispered, and he could hear the fear threading through her voice. Without another word, Lucas scooped her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, but solid and real against his chest, and he felt an overwhelming need to protect her, to save her, to not let death claim this woman who had occupied so many of his unspoken thoughts. He carried her to Thunder, who stood steady and patient, then carefully lifted her onto the saddle before swinging up behind her. "Hold on to me," he instructed, positioning her so she could lean back against his chest. "Hold on tight and do not let go no matter what." Delilah's arms wrapped around his waist, her head falling against his shoulder, and Lucas urged Thunder into a gallop. The desert landscape blurred around them, sage and rock and endless sky, the sun beating down mercilessly as they raced toward Empire City. He could feel Delilah weakening against him, her grip loosening, her breathing becoming more labored. "Stay with me," he said urgently, his lips close to her ear. "Miss Bennett, Delilah, stay with me. Talk to me. Tell me about Missouri." She stirred slightly at the sound of her name on his lips. "Cold," she murmured. "So cold there in winter, snow up to your waist. My father would carry me on his shoulders through the drifts." "What else?" Lucas kept his voice steady, conversational, even as panic clawed at his insides. Her skin was growing clammy, fever setting in despite the desert heat. "Mama made the best apple pie, used cinnamon and a little bit of honey. Won ribbons at the county fair 3 years running." Her voice was fading, growing dreamy and distant. "I would like to taste that pie someday," Lucas said, though he wondered if she would live long enough to ever make it. "What brought you west?" Aunt Martha needed help at the store after Uncle George passed, and I wanted to see something different. The desert seemed so exotic in the letters she wrote. A weak laugh escaped her. "Guess I got more exotic than I bargained for." Thunder was running flat out now, his powerful muscles bunching and releasing beneath them, foam flecking his neck. Lucas knew he was pushing the horse hard, perhaps too hard, but he had no choice. The desert stretched endlessly before them, and Empire City seemed impossibly far away. "Lucas," Delilah whispered, and he realized it was the first time she had used his given name. "If I do not make it, tell Aunt Martha I love her. Tell her I am sorry for being careless." "You are going to tell her yourself," he said fiercely. "You are going to survive this, and you are going to make me that apple pie, and you are going to have a long, full life. Do you hear me, Delilah Bennett? You are not allowed to die today." She did not respond, and terror seized him. He adjusted his hold on her, one arm wrapped firmly around her waist, keeping her secure against him while his other hand managed the reins. He could feel her heart beating against his arm, rapid and thready, and he willed it to keep going, to stay strong, to fight. The ride to Empire City normally took about 90 minutes at a moderate pace. Lucas made it in just over 40, pushing Thunder beyond anything he had ever asked of the horse before. The buildings of town finally appeared on the horizon, shimmering in the heat, and he felt a surge of desperate hope. People scattered as he thundered down Main Street, shouting for the doctor. Dust flew up around Thunder's hooves, and somewhere a dog barked frantically. Lucas pulled up hard in front of Doc Harrison's office, the horse sliding to a stop, sides heaving, covered in sweat and foam. "Doc!" Lucas shouted even as he was dismounting, carefully bringing Delilah down with him. "Doc Harrison, I need you now." The door flew open and Arthur Harrison, a man in his 50s with wire-rimmed spectacles and permanently ink-stained fingers, took one look at the woman in Lucas's arms and stepped aside. "Inside, quickly." "What happened?" "Rattlesnake bite about an hour ago." I sucked out what venom I could and rode as fast as possible. Lucas carried Delilah into the examination room, laying her gently on the table. Her face was gray now, her breathing shallow, and he felt his heart constrict with fear. Doc Harrison moved with practiced efficiency, cutting away Delilah's skirt to expose the wound. The swelling had spread halfway up her thigh, the skin mottled purple and black. He pressed gently around the area, his expression grave. "You did the right thing, getting that venom out," he said quietly. "Might have saved her life, but she is not out of danger yet. The next 24 hours will tell us if she is going to make it." Martha Bennett burst through the door at that moment, her face stricken with terror. Someone must have run to fetch her from the general store. "Delilah! Oh God, my sweet girl, what happened?" Lucas stepped back, giving the aunt room to reach her niece, but his eyes never left Delilah's pale face. He watched as Doc Harrison began his work, applying poultices and administering medicines that he hoped would counteract the remaining venom. Martha held her niece's hand, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks, murmuring prayers and words of comfort. "You should go," Doc Harrison said to Lucas after a while, not unkindly. "Nothing more you can do here. You have done more than most would. Get that horse of yours some water and rest. He earned it." Lucas wanted to protest, wanted to stay, but he recognized the wisdom in the doctor's words. Thunder stood outside, exhausted and spent, having given everything to get Delilah to help. He nodded slowly, reluctantly, his feet heavy as he moved toward the door. "Mr. Shepherd," Martha called out, and he turned. The older woman's eyes were red but grateful. "Thank you. Thank you for saving her." "She is not saved yet, madam," Lucas said quietly, "but I will be praying she pulls through." He led Thunder to the livery stable, personally seeing to the horse's care, rubbing him down thoroughly, making sure he had plenty of fresh water and oats. The stable hand, a young man named Timothy, watched with interest. "Heard you rode like the devil himself was chasing you," Timothy said. "That true about Miss Bennett getting bit by a rattler?" Word traveled fast in a small town. Lucas nodded wearily, suddenly feeling the exhaustion of the past hours settling into his bones. "Found her out past the eastern ridge. Venom was working fast. She going to make it?" "I hope so." The words felt inadequate, too small to contain the desperate wish behind them. Lucas walked to the boarding house where he rented a room, but he could not settle. He bathed, washing away the sweat and dust and the lingering taste of venom and blood, changed into clean clothes, and found himself drawn back toward Doc Harrison's office. He told himself he just wanted news, just wanted to know if she was still alive, but deep down he knew it was more than that. The sun was setting, painting the Nevada sky in shades of orange and purple, when he knocked softly on the doctor's door. Martha answered, her face showing the strain of the long afternoon. "Mr. Shepherd," she said, surprise evident in her voice, "I did not expect to see you again so soon." "I wanted to know how she is doing, madam, if that is all right." Martha's expression softened. "Come in." Doc Harrison is with her now. The examination room door was partially open, and Lucas could see Delilah lying on the table, still unconscious. Her color was marginally better, though the fever flush on her cheeks suggested she was burning up. Doc Harrison was placing cool compresses on her forehead, changing them frequently. "Fever has set in," the doctor explained without looking up. "Expected but dangerous. Her body is fighting the venom, but it is taking a toll. Next few hours are critical. Can I help?" The words were out before Lucas could stop them. Doc Harrison glanced up, studying him with keen eyes. "You know anything about nursing?" "No, sir, but I can follow instructions." "Martha needs to rest. She is about to collapse from worry and exhaustion. If you are willing to sit with Miss Bennett, change the compresses and fetch me immediately if anything changes, then yes, you can help." Martha started to protest, but Doc Harrison held up a hand. "Martha, you will be no good to your niece if you collapse. Mr. Shepherd here seems steady and reliable. Let him sit with her for a few hours while you get some rest. I will be right in the next room." Reluctantly, Martha agreed, though she insisted on showing Lucas exactly how to wring out the cloths and apply them before she would leave. Then she was gone, and Lucas found himself alone with Delilah for the first time since he had carried her into the office. He pulled a chair close to the table, settling in for what he suspected would be a long night. In the lamplight, even sick and fevered, she was beautiful. Her dark hair spread across the pillow, her features delicate but strong. He had watched her from afar for 3 months, admiring her quiet strength, the way she treated everyone with kindness, from the wealthiest mine owner to the poorest prospector. He had wanted to speak to her properly so many times, but his tongue always seemed to tangle when she looked at him with those intelligent eyes. Now here she was, fighting for her life, and he would have given anything to hear her voice again, to see her smile. He changed the compress on her forehead, noting how hot her skin felt against his fingers. Throughout the night, he kept vigil, periodically checking the wound on her leg, which remained angry and swollen but had at least stopped spreading. He talked to her quietly, telling her stories about growing up on a farm in Kansas, about coming west to seek his fortune, about thunder in the mountains, and the way the desert looked at sunrise. Around midnight, she stirred, murmuring something he could not quite catch. He leaned closer, his hand finding hers almost without conscious thought. "I am here," he said softly. "You are safe, Delilah. Just rest and get better." Her fingers twitched in his grip, and he thought perhaps she heard him, even in the depths of her fever. The hours crawled by, marked by the steady tick of the clock on Doc Harrison's wall and the soft sounds of Delilah's labored breathing. Lucas found himself praying, something he had not done with any real conviction since his mother died when he was 15. But now he prayed with desperate fervor, making bargains with God, promising to be better, to do more, if only this woman would live. Dawn was breaking, pale light filtering through the windows, when Delilah's fever finally broke. Lucas had dozed off in his chair, exhausted, but he woke instantly when he felt her stir. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion and pain evident in their depths, and then they focused on him. "Lucas." Her voice was barely a whisper, hoarse and weak. Relief flooded through him so powerfully that he felt dizzy. "I am here. You are at Doc Harrison's office. How do you feel?" "Like a horse kicked me and then dragged me behind a wagon for 10 miles. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "But alive. I am alive." "You are alive," he confirmed, unable to keep the emotion from his voice. "Your fever just broke. You gave us all quite a scare. I remember you carrying me, riding so fast. You saved my life. Thunder deserves most of the credit. That horse ran himself nearly to death getting you here. Then I owe you both a debt I can never repay." Her eyes searched his face, and something passed between them, a recognition that went beyond gratitude. Doc Harrison appeared in the doorway, alerted by the sound of voices. His tired face broke into a genuine smile when he saw Delilah awake and alert. "Well now, that is the best sight I have seen in quite some time. Welcome back, Miss Bennett. You had us worried." Over the next few days, Delilah's recovery progressed steadily. The swelling in her leg gradually subsided, the angry discoloration fading to yellow and green bruises. She remained at Doc Harrison's office under his careful watch, with Martha hovering nearby and Lucas visiting several times a day, always with some excuse. He was just passing by. He wanted to check on Thunder's heroics being properly acknowledged. He had heard the doc needed firewood chopped. The truth, which became apparent to everyone including Delilah herself, was that Lucas Shepherd was completely and thoroughly smitten. He brought her wildflowers he claimed he had found on his way to town, though the route from his boarding house had no such blooms. He read to her from the newspaper, stumbling over some of the bigger words but persisting with endearing determination. He told her stories that made her laugh, which Doc Harrison declared was the best medicine she could possibly have. For her part, Delilah found herself watching the door eagerly each day, waiting for Lucas to appear. She thought about the way he had not hesitated to help her, had risked his own safety to suck out the venom, had pushed his beloved horse to the limit to save a woman he barely knew. She remembered the strength of his arms around her during that desperate ride, the steadiness of his voice calling her back from the darkness, the gentleness in his calloused hands as he held hers through the night. On the 5th day after the bite, Doc Harrison declared her well enough to return home, though she was to stay off her feet as much as possible for another week. Lucas arrived with a wagon he had borrowed, lined with blankets to make the short journey as comfortable as possible. "Your chariot awaits, Miss Bennett," he said with a small bow that made her laugh. "You are ridiculous," she said, but her eyes were warm. He lifted her carefully, mindful of her healing leg, and carried her to the wagon. Martha fussed with the blankets, making sure her niece was comfortable, while Doc Harrison provided a long list of instructions for her continued care. "And you," the doctor said, fixing Lucas with a stern look, "deserve recognition for your quick thinking and bravery. That young lady would likely be dead if not for your actions." Lucas shifted uncomfortably, never one for praise or attention. "Just did what anyone would do, Doc." "No, you did what few men would have the courage or knowledge to do. You should be proud." The ride to the general store, where Martha and Delilah lived in the rooms above, took only minutes, but Lucas drove carefully, avoiding ruts in the road that might jostle his precious cargo. When they arrived, he carried Delilah up the stairs to her room, a cozy space with lace curtains and a quilt on the bed that reminded him this was a woman's private domain, and he was acutely aware of the intimacy of the moment. He set her gently on the bed, and their eyes met. For a long moment neither spoke, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. "Thank you," Delilah said finally, "for everything." "You do not need to keep thanking me," Lucas replied quietly. "I am just glad you are all right." "Lucas," she hesitated, then continued, "would you visit me? While I am recovering, I find I enjoy your company." His face broke into a genuine smile, the kind that transformed his weather-worn features and made her heart skip. "I would like that very much." True to his word, Lucas visited every evening after finishing his work at the ranch. He would sit in the chair beside Delilah's bed, and they would talk for hours about everything and nothing. She told him about her childhood in Missouri, about her parents and the life she had left behind. He shared stories of his own upbringing, the middle child among 5 siblings, and his dream of eventually having his own ranch someday. "Why did you come west?" Delilah asked one evening about 2 weeks after the snake bite. She was sitting up now, her leg healing well, though she still tired easily. Lucas was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. My father wanted me to take over the family farm, but my older brother already had that covered. I felt like there was nothing for me there, like I was just taking up space. So I figured I would head west, make my own way, prove I could amount to something. And have you? Proven it, I mean, he considered the question. I have made a living, earned respect from the men I work with. But I still want more. Want to build something of my own, something lasting. Like a ranch. That is the dream. Though at the rate I am saving, I will be too old to ride a horse by the time I can afford the land. He said it lightly, but she heard the frustration underneath. Dreams are worth holding on to, Delilah said softly. Even when they seem impossible. My mother used to say that faith and determination can move mountains, or at least help you climb them. Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman. She was. I miss her every day. Delilah's eyes grew distant. When the fever took her and my father, I thought I would never feel whole again. Aunt Martha saved me, really. Gave me a reason to keep going, a new place to start over. Lucas reached out and took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them over the past days. I am glad you came here. Despite the circumstances, I am glad I met you. She squeezed his hand, her cheeks coloring slightly. I am glad too. The moment stretched between them, filled with possibilities and the growing awareness that what had begun as a desperate rescue was blossoming into something deeper and far more meaningful. Lucas wanted to kiss her, wanted to tell her that she had occupied his thoughts for months even before the snake bite. But he held back, aware that she was still recovering, still vulnerable. As if reading his mind, Delilah spoke softly. When I was lying there in the desert after the snake bit me, I was so scared. But then you appeared, and even though I barely knew you, I felt safe. Isn't that strange? I do not think it is strange, Lucas replied. Sometimes you just know when someone is trustworthy. It is more than that, though. She looked down at their joined hands. At least, I hope it is. Lucas's heart thundered in his chest. What do you mean? I mean that I find myself thinking about you constantly. Looking forward to your visits. Feeling happier when you are here. And I wonder if perhaps you might feel the same way. He stood then, moving to sit on the edge of her bed, careful not to jostle her injured leg. With his free hand, he gently cupped her cheek, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. Delilah Bennett, I have been half in love with you since the day you arrived in Empire City. I used to make excuses to go to the general store just to see you, to hear your voice. When I found you in the desert, I was terrified I would lose you before I ever had the chance to tell you how I felt. Her eyes shimmered with tears, but she was smiling. Then tell me now. I love you, he said simply, the words feeling both enormous and inevitable. I know it is fast, I know we have not known each other long properly, but I cannot deny what my heart knows to be true. I love you too, she whispered. I think part of me started falling in love with you during that wild ride to town, feeling your arms around me, hearing your voice pulling me back from the darkness. You would not let me give up, would not let me slip away. Lucas leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted, but she met him halfway. Their lips touched softly at first, tentative and sweet, then with growing confidence and warmth. It was a kiss full of promise and hope, of death defied and life embraced, of two hearts finding each other against impossible odds. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, their eyes locked on each other with wonder and joy. Marry me, Lucas said suddenly, the words bursting from him with urgent certainty. I know I should wait, should court you properly, but life is too short and too uncertain. That snake bite taught me that. Marry me, Delilah. Let me spend the rest of my life making you happy. Delilah laughed, the sound bright and full of life. You are right, you should court me properly. But yes, Lucas Shepherd, I will marry you, on one condition. Anything. We wait at least 3 months, give me time to fully heal and for us to truly get to know each other outside of a sick room. And you have to ask Aunt Martha for permission properly. Deal, Lucas grinned, then kissed her again, unable to resist. Martha, who had been listening from the hallway with a smile on her face, chose that moment to clear her throat loudly before entering. Well, it is about time you two figured out what everyone else in town has known for weeks. Lucas Shepherd, if you hurt my niece, I will shoot you myself. Yes, madam, Lucas said seriously, but I promise you I would rather die than cause her pain. Good answer. Martha's stern expression melted into genuine warmth. Now, Lucas, it is getting late. Let Delilah rest. You can come by tomorrow and help out in the store if you want to make yourself useful. Lucas left reluctantly, but he was back the next morning before the store even opened, ready to work. Over the following weeks, he became a fixture at the general store, helping with heavy lifting, making deliveries, and generally making himself indispensable. The townspeople quickly accepted him as Delilah's intended, and more than a few remarked on what a fine couple they made. Delilah healed quickly, her natural resilience and youth serving her well. Within a month, she was back to working full days at the store, though Lucas still hovered protectively, earning gentle teasing from both Martha and Delilah. The scar on her calf remained, 2 small marks that would forever remind her of how close she had come to death, but also of the man who had saved her. True to her word, Delilah insisted they wait 3 months before marrying. Lucas used that time to save every penny he could, planning for their future. He also formally asked Martha for permission to marry her niece, a conversation that took place in the store's back room and left Lucas slightly terrified but ultimately triumphant. They were married on a bright October morning, 3.5 months after the rattlesnake bite. The ceremony took place in the small church at the edge of town, with most of Empire City in attendance. Delilah wore a simple but beautiful dress that Martha had helped her make, white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Lucas wore his best suit, borrowed from the general store's stock, his hair slicked back and his boots polished to a shine. Doc Harrison gave Delilah away, and Thunder, Lucas's loyal horse who had run himself nearly to exhaustion to save her life, stood decorated with ribbons outside the church, honored guest of the celebration. When Lucas and Delilah exchanged their vows, speaking clearly and with deep emotion, there was not a dry eye in the congregation. I promise to love you, protect you, and stand by your side through whatever challenges life brings, Lucas said, his voice strong and certain. You are my miracle, Delilah, the answer to prayers I did not even know I was praying. I promise to love you, support your dreams, and remind you every day how grateful I am that you found me in that desert, Delilah replied, tears streaming down her cheeks. You saved my life, Lucas, and now you have given it meaning and joy beyond anything I could have imagined. The kiss they shared as husband and wife was met with cheers and applause, and the celebration that followed lasted well into the night. The townspeople had pooled resources to throw the couple a proper wedding party, with food and music and dancing. Lucas, who claimed he had 2 left feet, surprised everyone by waltzing with his new wife with reasonable grace, holding her close and whispering things that made her blush and laugh. As the evening wound down and they prepared to leave for the small house Lucas had managed to rent on the outskirts of town, Doc Harrison pulled them aside. I have something for you, he said, handing Lucas an envelope. It is not much, but the town wanted to show their appreciation for your heroism. There is also a letter in there from the territorial governor commending your actions, Apparently word spread about what you did. Lucas opened the envelope to find not only the letter, but also a significant sum of money, contributions from grateful townspeople who wanted to help the young couple start their life together. "This is too much," Lucas protested. "I cannot accept this." "You can and you will," Martha said firmly, appearing beside the doctor. "You saved my niece's life. You gave her a future. Let people show their gratitude." Overwhelmed with emotion, Lucas could only nod, gripping Delilah's hand tightly. The money, combined with what he had already saved, would be enough to make a down payment on a piece of land, to start building toward his dream of owning a ranch. Their first year of marriage was not easy, but it was filled with love and determination. Lucas continued working at the Henderson Ranch while slowly building a small house on the 40 acres he had purchased north of Empire City. The land was rough and unforgiving, but it had water rights to a creek and enough grazing for a small herd of cattle. Delilah continued working at the general store with Martha, saving every penny they could spare. In the evenings, she would ride out to their land with dinner in a basket, and she and Lucas would eat together while watching the sun set over the mountains. They would talk about their plans, about the house they were building board by board, about the cattle they hoped to buy come spring, about the children they wanted to raise on this harsh but beautiful land. On the anniversary of the rattlesnake bite, Lucas took Delilah back to the spot where it had happened. They stood together in the desert, his arms around her waist, her back against his chest, looking out over the landscape that had nearly claimed her life. "I think about that day often," Delilah said softly, "how scared I was, how I thought I was going to die." "So do I," Lucas admitted. "I think about how close I came to losing you before I really had you. It terrifies me. But we are here now, together, building a life." She turned in his arms to face him. "And Lucas, I have news. We are going to have a baby." Joy exploded across his face, pure and incandescent. "Truly, we are going to be parents, truly. Doc Harrison confirmed it yesterday. I am about 3 months along, which means the baby should come in early spring." Lucas lifted her off her feet, spinning her around, his laughter echoing across the desert. When he set her down, he kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and gratitude and wonder into that single moment. "We need to finish the house," he said urgently. "Need to get it ready for the baby, and I should find more work, save more money." "We have time," Delilah assured him, touching his cheek gently, "and we will manage just like we always do, together." The winter was harsh that year, with temperatures dropping below freezing and snow dusting even the desert floor. But inside their newly completed house, small but sturdy, Lucas and Delilah were warm and happy. Lucas had managed to purchase 6 pregnant cows and a bull, the foundation of their future herd, and had built a modest barn to shelter them. Delilah's pregnancy progressed well, though the final months were uncomfortable. Martha visited often, bringing supplies and advice, fussing over her niece with the devotion of a mother. Doc Harrison stopped by regularly to check on both mother and baby, refusing payment and claiming it was the least he could do for family. In March of 1884, during a late winter storm that covered everything in a blanket of white, Delilah went into labor. Lucas rode through the snow in near panic to fetch Doc Harrison and Martha, Thunder once again proving his worth by navigating the treacherous conditions without faltering. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Lucas paced outside the bedroom, terrified and helpless, praying with the same desperate fervor he had employed when Delilah had been dying from the snake bite. When he finally heard the sharp wail of a newborn baby, he nearly collapsed with relief. Doc Harrison emerged, tired but smiling. "You have a son, Lucas, a healthy, strong boy, and Delilah is tired but doing well." Lucas stumbled into the bedroom to find his wife propped up against pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. When she looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears and joy, he felt his heart expand in his chest until he thought it might burst. "Meet your son," she said softly. Lucas approached slowly, almost reverently, and gazed down at the small, red-faced infant. The baby had a shock of dark hair, and his eyes, when they briefly opened, were deep blue. One tiny hand escaped the blanket, fingers curling and uncurling, and Lucas offered his finger. The baby gripped it immediately, his hold surprisingly strong. "He is perfect," Lucas whispered, tears streaming down his face. "You are amazing. I love you so much. What should we name him?" Delilah asked, looking between her husband and son. They had discussed names for months but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at his firstborn, Lucas thought of the journey that had brought them here, of the life they had built together, of the hope this child represented. "What about Thomas?" he suggested. "Thomas Arthur Shepard, after your father and Doc Harrison." Delilah's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Thomas Arthur Shepard, that is beautiful. My father would have been so proud." Little Thomas proved to be a healthy, vigorous baby with strong lungs and an appetite to match. He thrived under the devoted care of his parents, Grandaunt Martha, and the various townspeople who stopped by with gifts and well wishes. Lucas threw himself into building up the ranch, working from dawn until long after dark, driven by the need to provide for his growing family. The years passed, marked by hard work and slow but steady progress. The Shepard Ranch grew from 6 cows to 20, then 40. Lucas hired his first ranch hand, a young man named Peter who reminded him of himself at that age, eager and determined. They built a proper barn, expanded the house to include 2 more bedrooms, and dug a well that meant Delilah no longer had to haul water from the creek. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved following his father around the ranch, learning to ride almost before he could walk properly. When he was 3, Delilah gave birth to twins, daughters they named Sarah and Grace. The births were easier than Thomas's had been, and the girls were mirror images of each other, with their mother's dark hair and their father's steady gray eyes. The Shepard family became well known and well respected in Empire City and the surrounding territory. Lucas's reputation as a fair employer and skilled rancher grew, while Delilah, though busy with 3 young children, found time to help her Aunt Martha at the store when needed and to organize community events that brought the scattered residents of the area together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucas surprised Delilah with a trip back to Missouri to visit her childhood home and the graves of her parents. They brought the children, now 8, 5, and 5, on the long train journey east. Standing at her parents' graves, Delilah was able to introduce them to the grandchildren they would never meet, to tell them about the life she had built, the man she had married, the happiness she had found. "I wish they could have known you," she told Lucas as they walked back to the hotel, the children running ahead. "They would have loved you." "I wish I could have known them," Lucas replied, "but I like to think they know somehow, that they see how happy we are and approve." "Do you ever regret it?" Delilah asked suddenly. "Marrying me, tying yourself down so young. You were only 27. You could have done so many other things." Lucas stopped walking, turning to face her with surprise and something like offense. "Regret marrying you? Delilah, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. That day I found you in the desert, dying from that snake bite, was the day my real life began. Everything before that was just marking time, waiting for you without knowing it. Even when money is tight and the cattle are sick and Thomas has broken another window with his ball," she was smiling now, with tears glistening in her eyes. Even then, especially then. He pulled her close, right there on the main street of her old hometown, and kissed her thoroughly. "I love you more today than I did 10 years ago, and I will love you even more 10 years from now. That is my promise." They returned to Nevada renewed and refreshed, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The ranch continued to prosper, and by their 15th anniversary, Lucas had achieved his dream of becoming one of the most successful ranchers in the region. They employed 5 full-time hands and had nearly 200 head of cattle grazing their expanded lands. Thomas, now 13, was already a skilled rider and roper, showing signs of becoming an even better rancher than his father. The twins, 10 years old, were bright and mischievous, keeping their parents on their toes. And in the spring of 1897, Delilah gave birth to their 4th and final child, another son they named Andrew. Martha, now in her 70s but still sharp and capable, sold the general store and moved permanently to the ranch, occupying one of the expanded bedrooms and serving as beloved grandmother to the children. She spent her days teaching the girls to sew and cook, telling stories of the old days, and spoiling all the grandchildren shamelessly. Doc Harrison, though retired from active practice, remained a frequent visitor and trusted friend. He often joked that saving Delilah Bennett's life was his greatest professional achievement, though he claimed credit belonged to Lucas and Thunder. Thunder himself lived to the remarkable age of 28, spending his final years grazing peacefully in the home pasture, beloved by all the shepherd children and visited regularly by townspeople who remembered his heroic ride. When he finally passed in his sleep one autumn night, Lucas and Delilah buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch with a simple marker that read, "Thunder, loyal friend and hero, who ran like the wind to save a life." As the 19th century drew to a close and a new one began, the Shepherd Ranch stood as a testament to what determination, love, and hard work could build. Lucas and Delilah watched their children grow, seeing Thomas eventually take over the day-to-day running of the ranch, the twins marry good men from neighboring spreads, and young Andrew show signs of wanting to become a veterinarian. On a warm evening in the summer of 1912, as they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, Martha, and half the town of Empire City, Lucas and Delilah stood together on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. "Do you remember what I asked you?" Delilah said, leaning against her husband's shoulder. "That day in Missouri when I asked if you ever regretted marrying me." "I remember," Lucas replied, his arm around her waist, "and my answer has not changed. Good, because I have never regretted it either. Not for one single moment." She turned to look at him, this man who had saved her life and then spent 30 years making it worth living. His hair was gray now, his face lined with years of sun and wind, but his eyes still held the same steady strength that had given her courage during that desperate ride through the desert. "I love you, Delilah Shepherd," he said, as he had said countless times over 3 decades. "I love you, Lucas Shepherd," she replied, as she had replied countless times before. They kissed, and in that kiss was everything they had built together, the ranch spreading out before them, the children laughing inside the house, the grandchildren playing in the yard, the life they had carved from harsh land and impossible odds. It was a kiss of gratitude and promise, of memories shared and future yet to come. Inside, someone called for them to come cut the anniversary cake Martha had baked, and they turned together, hands clasped, to rejoin their family. As they walked through the door, Delilah glanced back one more time at the desert landscape. thinking of a young woman gathering herbs and a rattlesnake strike that should have ended her life, but instead became the beginning of everything beautiful. The scar on her calf, faded now but still visible, would forever remind her that sometimes the most terrifying moments lead to the greatest blessings, that death defied becomes life embraced, and that true love often arrives in the most unexpected ways, carried on the back of a heroic horse ridden by a cowboy who refused to let her go. Years continued to pass in the comfortable rhythm of ranch life. Thomas married a schoolteacher from Carson City named Elizabeth, and they gave Lucas and Delilah their first grandson, whom they named Lucas after his grandfather. The twins, Sarah and Grace, had married within 6 months of each other, Sarah to a banker's son and Grace to a neighboring rancher, and between them provided 5 more grandchildren. Andrew, true to his early interests, studied veterinary medicine in California and returned to Empire City to open the region's first proper veterinary practice. He married late, at 30, to a widow named Catherine who had a young daughter, instantly making Lucas and Delilah step-grandparents as well. Martha lived to see her 92nd birthday, surrounded by the family she had helped nurture and build. She passed peacefully in her sleep one spring morning in 1919, and they buried her next to Thunder on the hill, reasoning that she would have appreciated being near the horse that had made it all possible. Doc Harrison followed 2 years later, also in his sleep, and the whole town mourned the loss of the man who had served them for over 40 years. At his funeral, Lucas stood and told the story of the rattlesnake bite once more, his voice still strong at 66, describing how the doctor's skill had complemented the desperate measures taken in the desert. "He saved my wife," Lucas said simply. "And in doing so, he saved me too, because I cannot imagine a life without her." Delilah, sitting in the front pew with tears streaming down her face, felt the same surge of love she had felt during that wild ride to safety, during their wedding, during the births of their children, during every significant moment of their shared life. Lucas had been her constant, her anchor, her great love, and she knew with absolute certainty that she was his. The 1920s brought changes to Empire City and the surrounding territory. Cars began to replace horses, though the Shepherd Ranch maintained both, recognizing that vehicles had limitations in rough country. Electricity reached town, though the ranch would not be wired until 1927. Radio became popular, bringing news and entertainment from distant cities. Through it all, Lucas and Delilah adapted while holding firm to the values that had built their life together: hard work, honesty, family, and love. They celebrated their 40th anniversary quietly, just the two of them riding out to the spot where the rattlesnake had bitten her so long ago. 40 years, Delilah marveled, dismounting with only slightly less grace than she had possessed as a young woman. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like yesterday." "I know what you mean," Lucas agreed, helping her spread the blanket he had brought. They sat together, sharing a meal of bread and cheese and apples, watching the desert landscape that had witnessed the beginning of their story. "You think if I had not been bitten, we would have found each other anyway?" Delilah asked, a question she had pondered many times over the years. Lucas considered carefully. "I like to think so. I was already half in love with you, remember? I would have worked up the courage to speak to you eventually." "Eventually," she teased. "You might have taken years, maybe, probably." He grinned at her, the expression still boyish despite his years. "But the snake bite forced my hand, made me act instead of just watching from afar, so maybe I should be grateful to that rattler." "Do not let me hear you say that," Delilah laughed. "I am not grateful to a snake that nearly killed me." No, but you are grateful for what came after. For what came after, she agreed, leaning her head on his shoulder. For you, for our children, for this life. Yes, I am grateful beyond measure. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun track across the sky, holding hands as they had for 40 years. Eventually, Lucas spoke again, his voice thoughtful. You know what I think about sometimes? How many little moments had to line up perfectly for us to be together. If I had not been tracking that cougar that day, if my rifle had not misfired, if you had been gathering herbs somewhere else, if Thunder had not been as fast and strong as he was, if Doc Harrison had been out of town, any one of those things being different and you might have died. Or we might never have met properly, Delilah added. I think about that too. It makes me appreciate every day we have together, knowing how easily it might not have happened. I appreciate every day too, Lucas said quietly, especially now that we are getting older. I know we would not have forever, even though I wish we could. Delilah squeezed his hand. Then let us make the most of the time we do have. Let us keep building, keep loving, keep being grateful for this unexpected blessing we were given. They kept that promise through the rest of the 1920s and into the 1930s. As the country struggled through the Great Depression, the Shepherd Ranch weathered the storm better than many, thanks to years of careful management and diversification. They provided work when they could, food when possible, and hope always. Their children had grown into strong, capable adults who embodied the values their parents had instilled. The grandchildren, now numbering 12, ranged from young adults to babies, providing constant entertainment and occasional exasperation. And in 1932, they welcomed their first great-grandchild, Thomas's grandson, another Lucas to carry on the family name. Lucas Sr., now 77, spent less time working the ranch directly and more time teaching the younger generation the skills and knowledge he had accumulated over a lifetime. He was patient and thorough, taking particular joy in teaching his great-grandson to ride, just as he had taught his own children and grandchildren. Delilah, 75, had slowed down as well but remained sharp and engaged. She maintained a remarkable memory for family history and stories, entertaining the younger generations with tales of the old days, of life in Empire City when it was still rough and untamed, of adventures and hardships and triumphs. But her favorite story, the one she was asked to tell over and over, was always the same: how their grandfather had saved her from a rattlesnake bite and ridden like the wind to get her to safety, how he had sat by her bedside through the night, how they had fallen in love and built this family and this ranch from nothing but determination and devotion. On what would be their 50th wedding anniversary, in October of 1933, the family planned a massive celebration. Invitations went out to everyone in Empire City and beyond. Preparations began weeks in advance, with the ranch house being cleaned and decorated, food being prepared, and accommodations being arranged for out-of-town guests. But 3 days before the celebration, Lucas suffered a heart attack while working in the barn. He collapsed, and by the time Andrew found him and brought Delilah running, he was barely conscious. They carried him into the house, into the bedroom he had shared with Delilah for 50 years, and sent for the new doctor in town, though deep down everyone knew there was little to be done. Delilah sat beside him, holding his hand, just as he had once sat beside her during her darkest hours. His breathing was labored, his face gray, but his eyes, when they found hers, were still full of love. "I am sorry," he whispered. "Wanted to make it to 50 years." "We did make it to 50 years, Delilah said fiercely, tears streaming down her face. 3 more days is just a formality. We have been married 50 years in every way that matters. Good, that is good." His grip on her hand tightened slightly. "No regrets, Delilah, not a single one." "No regrets," she agreed, her voice breaking. "Only gratitude. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for this beautiful life." "Thank you for saying yes," he replied. "For taking a chance on a cowboy with more dreams than money. For building this life with me." He paused, fighting for breath. "You made every day worth living." Their children had gathered around the bed now, Thomas and the twins and Andrew, along with many of the grandchildren. Lucas looked at each of them in turn, his expression one of pride and peace. "Take care of your mother," he instructed his children. "Take care of each other, keep the ranch going. Remember what it stands for: hard work, integrity, family." "We will, Dad," Thomas promised, his own eyes wet with tears. "We will make you proud." "Already proud," Lucas murmured. "So proud of all of you." He turned his attention back to Delilah, and everyone else seemed to fade away. It was just the two of them again, as it had been in the beginning, as it had always truly been. Two people who had found each other against impossible odds and had built something remarkable. "I will wait for you," he said softly. "On the other side will not be the same without you." "Do not wait too long," Delilah replied, trying to smile through her tears. "I will have things I need to finish here first, grandchildren to watch grow up, great-grandchildren to meet." "But I will come, Lucas. I promise I will come." "Love you," he breathed. "Always loved you. From that first day I found you in the desert, you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, even dying from snake venom." "I love you too," Delilah said, leaning close so their foreheads touched. "With everything I am, with everything I have ever been. You are my great love, Lucas Shepard, my hero, my partner, my home." He smiled then, a peaceful, contented expression, and closed his eyes. His breathing gradually slowed, became shallower, and then, with Delilah still holding his hand and their family gathered around, Lucas Shepard took his last breath and passed quietly from the world. The funeral 3 days later, on what would have been their anniversary, was the largest Empire City had ever seen. People came from hundreds of miles away to pay their respects to a man who had embodied the best qualities of the Old West: courage, loyalty, integrity, and love. They told stories of his kindness, his fair dealing, his willingness to help neighbors in need. But the story everyone kept coming back to was the rattlesnake bite, the desperate ride, the love that had sprung from near tragedy and had lasted 50 years. It had become legend in the region, a testament to quick thinking and devotion, and to the idea that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the very best. Delilah stood strong through the service, accepting condolences with grace, though everyone could see the light had dimmed in her eyes. They buried Lucas on the hill next to Thunder and Martha, with a view of the ranch he had built and the desert where his great adventure had begun. For the next 2 years, Delilah remained active in family life, watching her grandchildren grow, meeting new great-grandchildren, offering wisdom and guidance when asked. But those close to her could see she was fading, that part of her had gone with Lucas and was simply waiting for the rest to follow. She passed away peacefully in her sleep in December of 1935, 2 months after her 78th birthday. Her family found her in the morning, still looking peaceful, a slight smile on her face, and they knew she had gone to join Lucas as she had promised. At her funeral, Andrew stood to speak, sharing one final story. "Near the end, my mother told me something I want to share with all of you." She said that when she was lying in that desert, dying from the rattlesnake bite, she had a moment of clarity. She realized that life is precious and brief, that love is the only thing that truly matters, and that sometimes you have to survive the worst to appreciate the best. She said that being bitten by that snake was the worst thing that ever happened to her, but it led directly to the best thing: our father, this family, this life. He paused, emotion thick in his voice. She wanted everyone to know that if she had to go through it all again, the pain and fear and near death, she would do it in a heartbeat because it brought her to Dad. She said that was the definition of true love, being willing to face death if it meant finding the person who made life worth living. They buried Delilah next to Lucas on the hill, their headstones side by side, a matched pair reunited in death as they had been united in life. The inscription on her stone, chosen by her children, reads simply, "Delilah Bennett, shepherd, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She found love in the desert and built paradise with it." The Shepherd Ranch continued to thrive through the generations, eventually encompassing over 3,000 acres and becoming one of the most successful operations in Nevada. The original house, expanded and modernized but still fundamentally the same structure Lucas had built board by board, remained at the heart of the property, a monument to what two people could create through love and determination. On the hill where Lucas, Delilah, Thunder, and Martha rested, later generations of shepherds would add their own stones as they passed, building a family cemetery that overlooked the desert and told the story of a legacy that began with a snake bite and a desperate ride and blossomed into something enduring and beautiful. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the Nevada mountains in shades of orange and purple, visitors to the cemetery could almost imagine they heard the thunder of hoofbeats, could almost see a young cowboy racing across the desert with a dying woman in his arms, could almost feel the desperate hope and fierce determination that had saved a life and created a legend. The story of Lucas and Delilah Shepherd became part of Empire City's history, told and retold, embellished and romanticized, but always remaining fundamentally true. A story about courage in the face of death, about love discovered in unlikely circumstances, about two people who found each other and built something lasting and beautiful in one of the harshest environments on Earth. It was a story about the Old West at its finest, about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, about the power of quick thinking and loyal horses and devoted hearts. But most of all, it was a love story, pure and simple and eternal, proving that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the most terrifying moments, and that true love, once found, can overcome anything that life or death might bring. The ranch still stands today, run by the 6th generation of shepherds, and visitors are always welcome to hear the story, to see the hill where the family rests, to understand that what began with venom and fear and a wild ride through the desert became a testament to the enduring power of love, family, and the indomitable human spirit that tamed the Wild West and built a nation.